here in the United States, you have a massive boost through unethical tax cuts. You have a massive boost through years of unconventional monetary policies. You have 10 trillion that has been created of wealth. So every single lever has been pulled that you would have expected from a kind of supply side perspective to have created growth of 7-8%, and you don't. You have much more tepid growth. And especially if you look at growth in industries that actually create good quality jobs, there isn't any, even in the United States. In Europe, you have negative interest rates still to this day. You have QE that keeps pumping money into the system, but all that does, it makes the imbalance between savings and investment grow further, only because the money that is being produced, generated by the system in order to supposedly to rebalance an austerity-prone world, is being used in order to buy back shares.
Right.
And that creates greater inequality. It does not create more investment, so the whole thing perpetuates.
So look,
but you asked me what should we do?
No, what's brilliant about this book, I have to tell you, it is deep in Marxist analysis. Polanyi is very prominent. Minsky, in terms of endogenous debt cycles. Keynes, as you've just elaborated, and those words are almost never uttered. It's so beautifully told. And the question is...
I made the point of not mentioning any economist or any ism or any theory.
It's beautiful in that respect, that you tell these stories so compellingly without invoking the old theoretical canon. And I just wonder, what's wrong with capitalism, that S minus I is so great? Say that capitalism is doing so wonderfully, interest rates are so low and all the things you mentioned, and the investment is not taking place. What's wrong with capitalism?
It's an irrational system.
So elaborate.
Well, I don't need to explain this in the new school, for God's sakes. Do I? Have we reached the stage? Look, Marx's critique of capitalism was that capitalism is not... The problem with capitalism is not that it is unjust. Marx had no time for the concept of justice, for the concept of equality. Remember what he said he did to poor citizen Weston?
Say it again?
Remember what he did, how he just destroyed citizen Weston in the beginning of Wages, Prices and Profit, the little pamphlet. His critique was that it is an irrational system, that it makes really bad use of the technologies that it creates, that at the same time that as it is producing immense wealth, it must produce gigantic and unprecedented forms of depravity, deprivation, and poverty. This is not an accident, it's part of the system, that the crises are an essential regulating device, so having, the grapes of wrath periodically is the only way that the system can sustain itself. In other words, it's a system which is designed to take whole generations and put them in the dustbin. And this is where I learned at the age of 12 or 13, my economics. And I have to say that I was indelibly marked by that view.
That's how you got into game theory?
No, game theory came much later, by a complete historical accident. I came across a paper in the American Economic Review by some MIT professor, and I was so incensed by it that I dedicated a large chunk of my life trying to bring it down, or to explain to myself why I was incensed with it. But that's another story.
So the irrationality of capitalism. I want to open it up for questions for Yanis. But two other questions I had first. First of all, about debt and political money, which is also very brilliantly rendered in the book. Simply,
I had the Irish finance minister, a right-winger, who hated my guts. He actually said so in the review, that he hated my guts. But at the same time, he actually said that this chapter is the best chapter he's ever read on money.
So explain to us what you mean. Explain to us what it means. Political money is a phrase I wasn't familiar with, so I was really intrigued.
Well, I made it up in response to Bitcoin and to the gold standard, and generally to the quantity theory of money. The Bitcoiners, in their interesting attempt to make a break, to escape the politicization of money through the central banks, have created this myth that you can leave it to an algorithm which effectively simulates the gold standard, but it does so in a way that does not put the government at the commanding heights of the central bank.
Self-regulated.
So this is the fantasy of apolitical money. You can have money that serves all of us, that it is not a subject of democracy, it's not a subject of collective decision-making, it's a technological solution, which...
but it's also political money that has gotten us into such difficulty.
That is correct. But politics is like all instruments of humanity. They can be used for good or for ill.
So how do you
But the point I'm making is that you cannot depoliticize money. Even an attempt to depoliticize money, which is what the ECB did, the European Central Bank. The whole point about setting up the European Central Bank in Europe, going back to the original discussion about Europe, think about what we did in Europe. We did something quite remarkable. Never has it been done before, and I hope that it will never be done again. We created a central bank without a state, and we have 19 states without a central bank. The whole point being that, you just, like Bitcoin, instead of having an algorithm, you have a building in Frankfurt. They have something like an algorithm working in there, producing a quantity of money that politicians cannot meddle with, therefore parliaments cannot meddle with, therefore it's outside the realm of democratic politics, or politics at all. And then, of course, when you do that, privateers, private banking creates as much money as they want during the good times, and during the bad times, it all disappears, and you have a massive recession. And then they have to create all the shenanigans that Mario Draghi had to go through in order to justify QE as if it is not QE. So they understood that money must be political, in the sense that the quantity of money and the type of money must constantly be adjusted, and the adjustments that you make will always have political and class-determined and related effects. In other words, it must be politicized, and it better be democratized if it is going to be political.
So on the democratized money point, just to come back to your movement, your European movement, is democratization of central bank and money a central piece of the platform?
Yes,
you didn't really elaborate.
Yes, it is, but we're being very careful. You see, Europeans are smart people. All people are smart people, but now I'm talking about Europe. So I sounded very Eurocentric for a moment. Didn't mean to, sorry. Okay, let me start again. Every time a European voter, however exasperated she or he may be with the developments in Europe, hears a politician say, elect me and I will change the charter of the European Central Bank, I will bring on a new treaty, I will change the constitutional setting and institutional setting of Europe, and then everything will be fantastic. We're all going to be tall, blonde, blue-eyed, and Swedish. Huh? Joking. They panic because they know that for the charter of the ECB to change, you need 19 parliaments to agree. And in some cases, not parliaments, but referenda. So that will never, ever happen in the mind of the electorate. So, of course, we should change the charter of the ECB. It was written by cretins who wanted to be particularly sadistic towards a whole continent. But if this is your political program, if people, if journalists, and you know how journalists are, they shove a microphone in your mouth and say, okay, why should we vote for you? It's the correct question. If you say, because we are going to change the charter of the ECB, that's it. The public has immediately switched off you. They think, okay, go away. This will never happen. You're wasting our time. So what we are trying to do as DiEM25, what we have done, we spent 2 years, and I'm personally very proud of this because it's actually quite good work. We created a document which we call the European New Deal, and I think by the name you understand what it is. It is an attempt to reconfigure existing institutions within the existing rules in a manner that would make an appreciable difference when it comes to the 4 sub-crises afflicting Europe. Public debt, private debt, banking, low levels of investment, especially in the things that we need, like green transition, and poverty. Yeah? Now, we think that it is absolutely perfectly possible, within the existing charter of the ECB, with the European stability mechanism, that awful institution as it is, using the only good institution that we have in Europe that we should be proud of, the European Investment Bank, and its offshoot, the European Investment Fund. So we set up a kind of New Deal along the lines of Roosevelt's New Deal for today, using the existing institutions in order to effectively press into the service of the things that need to be done in Europe today. There are around 2 trillion euros, which is idling around, doing nothing, gathering dust and bidding up asset prices in Europe without contributing to investment. And that can happen tomorrow morning, and it can happen on the basis of a single press conference, where you have the President of the European Investment Bank, the President of the European Central Bank, the President of the European Union Council, the President of the European Stability Mechanism, making one announcement that takes half an hour, and suddenly the environment is complete. Of course, you need political will to do it. We need to win elections in order to make these people do it. But you don't need new rules. You don't need new treaties. So, in a sense, 2 steps. First step, stabilize. New Deal. Not something extremely radical, but something that in the end is radical. Not because of because you blow anything up and you change the institutions, but because you do radical things with the existing boring institutions. And then, or simultaneously, embark upon what we call a constitutional assembly process, leading to within, and that's why DM25 has this 25 at the end, by the year 2025, to a constitutional assembly at the pan-European level to discuss what kind of democratic constitution we want as Europeans for Europe. Because this is one thing we lack in here. You know, people say to me, oh, the Americans are together because they have the same language, because they are a homogeneous nation. That's not true. This country is not homogeneous at all. But what plays a very important role at the level of the imaginary in this country is the Constitution of the United States. Would it not be great if we, even if we didn't get to having a democratic constitution of the European Union, to have a constitutional assembly process where we actually discuss what it might be? Can we imagine 20 pages of a constitution of Europe that would actually work? This is an exercise that would bring us together, and if the economic background has been stabilized through the New Deal process, the European Green New Deal, then this, I can think of nothing else, no other process that would bring hope.
I want to ask you my last question about kind of the uphill battle you fight, because what we see and read a lot about is the illiberal turn and the turn away from the kind of democratic politics that you're describing, partly in response to the same issues that you're identifying, stagnation, fear, etc. And I just wonder how your pro-Europe democratic agenda kind of confronts that right-wing illiberal move, you know, Orban, etc., that you know, could potentially feed into your movement, because these are people who are also disgruntled by the lack of European democracy.
Yes, look, the 1930s is
and we have a similar problem here in the U.S.
The 1930s should be our point of reference, because think about it. There was a spectacular failure of the establishment, whether it was the Weimar Republic or France at the time, or Holland for that matter. The sticking to the gold standard until the last 1937. And what did that bear? Nazism, fascism, racism galore. And so our failure to create a New Deal for Europe is simply going to become the greatest gift to the xenophobes and the racists that once again are showing a remarkable capacity to divide, multiply, grow, and in the end unite amongst themselves. Look at the solidarity between all those misanthropes. Salvini, the AfD, Le Pen, they all love each other. And they have the only people who actually show serious internationalism in Europe today are the bankers and the fascists. We of the left have our work cut out for us.